The rain in Chicago doesn't just fall, it colonizes. It claims the skyscrapers, the dark alleys of the Loop, and the windshield of my charcoal Audi as I sat idling in the driveway of my own home. I've spent 15 years as a structural architect. My entire life is dedicated to the math of stability, knowing exactly how much weight a beam can carry before it snaps, knowing the precise point where a foundation becomes a liability. I thought I knew the load-bearing capacity of my marriage. I was wrong. I looked up at the warm glow coming from the second-story window of our Lincoln Park brownstone. It was the kind of house people stopped to take pictures of. Classic, ivy-covered, expensive. Inside was Clara, my wife of 10 years. She was a gallery curator, a woman of aesthetics and fine lines. We were the power couple of our social circle. But for the last 6 months, there had been a structural shift. A hairline fracture I couldn't quite see, but could definitely feel every time we sat down for dinner. When I walked inside, the air smelled like expensive candles and the ghost of a conversation that had ended the moment I turned the key. Clara was standing in the kitchen, a glass of Pinot Noir in her hand. She looked perfect. She always did. "Ethan," she said, her voice like silk over gravel, "we need to talk. Not about the house, not about the firm, about us." I put my briefcase down. "Okay, Clara, talk." "I feel like we've become stagnant," she began, pacing the marble floor. "We're young, we're successful, but we're contained. I've been reading a lot, talking to some friends in the city, and I think we should explore an open marriage. I need to find myself again, an outside of just being Ethan's wife. It's about growth, honey. It's about honesty." The word honesty felt like a slap. I looked at the woman I had built my world around and realized the foundation had already turned to dust. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. "An open marriage," I repeated. The words tasted like ash. "You want to bring other people into this house? Into our bed?" "It wouldn't be like that," she said quickly, stepping closer. "It's about freedom. It's about not being tied down by traditional expectations that don't fit our modern life. I think it could actually bring us closer." I looked at her, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't see my partner. I saw a project that was no longer worth the renovation costs. I knew what this was. This wasn't about growth. This was about permission. She wanted a hall pass for a journey she had likely already started. "It isn't necessary, Clara," I said, my voice eerily calm. She blinked, a look of triumph flashing in her eyes. "You mean, you agree? You're okay with it?" "I mean, it isn't necessary to have a policy for it," I lied, the first of many lies I would have to tell to survive. "If you need space, take it. If you need to find yourself, go ahead. But don't expect me to be the same man when you come back." She hugged me then. It was the coldest hug I'd ever received. She thought she had won. She thought she had manipulated the logical architect into a corner. What she didn't realize is that when an architect sees a building is beyond saving, he doesn't try to patch the drywall. He plans a controlled demolition. Welcome to Family Secrets and Revenge. This is just the beginning of how I tore my life down to build something better. Clara went to bed early that night, claiming she had a headache, but her phone was glued to her hand until the second she turned off the lamp. I waited. I sat in my home office, the blue light of my monitors the only thing illuminating the room. I've always been a man of data. In my business, if a measurement is off by a millimeter, a balcony falls. If a transaction is off by a cent, a firm goes under. I waited until I heard the rhythmic, heavy breathing of her deep sleep. Then I walked back into our bedroom. Her iPad was charging on the nightstand. I knew her passcode. It was the date of our wedding. How poetic. I took the device back to my office and began to dig. I expected to find a few suggestive texts or maybe a hidden Tinder profile. I was prepared for the sting of physical betrayal. What I found was a tectonic shift. She hadn't just been talking to another man. She had been talking to Julian Vance. Julian was the lead partner at Vance and Associates, my firm's primary competitor in the Chicago area. For the last 3 years, we had been locked in a cold war over the Oasis Project, a massive redevelopment of the old industrial waterfront. It was a $300 million contract. It was the kind of project that defines a career. The messages between them weren't just romantic, they were transactional. Julian, did you get the revised cost estimates for the steel foundations? Clara, I'll have them by Tuesday. Ethan keeps his project files in the blueprints folder on his encrypted cloud. I have the secondary key now. My blood turned to ice. She wasn't just cheating on me in a bed, she was cheating on me in my life's work. She was feeding my proprietary designs, my bidding strategies, and my structural innovations directly to the man who was trying to put me out of business. I'm sitting here wondering if any of you have ever felt that cold chill of realizing the person sleeping next to you is actually your biggest enemy. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. I spent the next 4 hours downloading every thread, every image, and every document she had sent him. But she had been doing this for nearly a year. The open marriage request wasn't a new desire. It was an exit strategy. She and Julian were planning to merge their lives once my firm collapsed under the weight of lost bids and mysterious failures. The next morning, the sun hit the Chicago skyline with a deceptive brightness. I watched Clara from across the breakfast table. She was humming, scrolling through her phone, probably reporting back to Julian that the husband is on board. I have a big meeting today for the Oasis Project, I said, watching her over the rim of my coffee mug. We're finalizing the load-bearing specs for the North Tower. If we get this right, Vance and Associates won't even be able to compete on the price point. I saw her hand pause for a fraction of a second. That's wonderful, honey. Ish, you've worked so hard on that. I have, I said, and I'm going to make sure it's perfect. As soon as she left for the gallery, I called a man named Marcus. Marcus was a fixer I'd used years ago when a contractor tried to blackmail my firm over a minor permit violation. He was a former digital forensics expert for the feds who now worked in the private sector, mostly dealing with corporate espionage and high-stakes divorce. We met at a dingy diner in Greektown, a place where the coffee was strong and the booths were deep enough to hide a conversation. You look like hell, Ethan, Marcus said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. I did the preliminary sweep you asked for on the drive over. Your home network is compromised. Someone installed a keystroke logger on your main workstation. I know who did it, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and focus. I need you to help me feed them a ghost. A ghost? Marcus asked. I want to give Clara and Julian exactly what they want, I explained. I want to give them the blueprints to the Oasis Project, but I want those blueprints to be a lie. I'm going to design a building that looks perfect on paper, but contains a mathematical poison pill that will disqualify their bid and bankrupt anyone who tries to build it. Marcus grinned. It wasn't a friendly look. You're not just divorcing her, are you? No, I said. I'm demolishing her. But first I need to make sure the evidence of her theft is undeniable. I need you to set up a honeypot, a folder on my server that looks like it's the holy grail of my firm's data. We'll track every time she accesses it, every time she downloads, and where those files go. Over the next week, I became a ghost in my own home. I was attentive, modern, and supportive of Clara's newfound freedom. I even suggested she take a weekend trip to a wellness retreat in Sedona, knowing full well Julian had a vacation home there. You're being so understanding, Ethan, she said as she packed her bags. I honestly didn't think you'd be this open to it. Like I said, Clara, I just want you to be happy. If Julian makes you happy, who am I to stand in the way? She froze. The name hung in the air like a live wire. Julian? I didn't say I was seeing Julian. I smiled, the kind of smile you give a child who thinks they've hidden a broken vase. I just assumed. He's your type, isn't he? Successful, aggressive, a real builder. She laughed it off, but I saw the sweat on her upper lip. She was getting sloppy because she thought she had already won. She thought I was the weak, emotional husband she could manipulate with a few buzzwords about personal discovery. While she was in Sedona with my greatest rival, I was in the office with my team. I told them we were creating a decoy bid to flush out a mole. They didn't know the mole was my wife. We worked late into the nights crafting a masterpiece of architectural fiction. I designed the apex wing of the Oasis Project. On the surface, it was a miracle of glass and cantilevered steel. It used a revolutionary new alloy, or so the documents claimed. In reality, the alloy didn't exist, and the weight distribution I was feeding her was based on a flawed gravitational constant I'd subtly altered in the subcode of the files. If Julian used these specs, and I knew he would, and because he was too arrogant to double-check my math, his firm would submit a bid that was physically impossible to construct. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. The silence in the house while Clara was in Sedona wasn't empty. It was clinical. It felt like the moments before a controlled implosion of a condemned building. I spent those 48 hours transforming our home into a digital dragnet. Marcus had provided me with high-resolution, motion-activated cameras disguised as standard USB wall chargers. I placed them in the kitchen, the living room, and my office. I wasn't looking for cheating anymore. I had enough of that to fill a gallery. And I was looking for the physical theft of my firm's assets, the prototype materials and the proprietary black box encryption drive I kept in my floor safe. I knew Julian would want that drive. It contained the source code for our structural simulation software, something Family Secrets and Revenge had spent $5 million developing. When Clara returned on Sunday night, she looked radiant. "Sedona was transformative, Ethan," she said, dropping her designer luggage in the foyer. "I did a lot of meditating, a lot of thinking about us." "I bet you did," I said. "Did you find the clarity you were looking for?" Monday morning at the firm was a theater of the absurd. I stood in front of my senior partners, men who had mentored me, men I was now forced to lie to for their own protection. "When the Oasis Project bid is finalized," I announced, clicking through the slides of the ghost blueprints. "We've optimized the steel-to-glass ratio by 14% using the Vance method of cantilevered support." My mentor, Arthur, frowned. "The Vance method? Ethan, that's Julian Vance's signature style. Why would we use his tech?" "Because," I said, a cold spark in my eyes, "we found the flaw in it, and we're going to show the city council exactly why his firm's designs are a death trap." That night, I accidentally left my office door unlocked and my workstation logged into the Oasis_master server. I went to the gym, but I didn't work out. I sat in my car in a dark corner of the parking lot, watching the live feed from my office camera on my tablet. Clara entered the room 5 minutes after I left. She didn't hesitate. She sat in my chair, the chair where I'd sat for hundreds of hours designing our future, and plugged a high-speed flash drive into the port. I watched her eyes reflect the blue light of the data transfer. She was humming a song we danced to at our wedding. "Got you?" I whispered to the empty car. 2 days later, Clara suggested we have dinner with some friends at the signature room on the 95th floor of the Hancock building. Julian Vance sat across from me, radiating the smug energy of a man who had already won the lottery. He was wearing a $5,000 suit. Elena, his wife, looked miserable. She was a sharp woman, a lawyer, and I could see the suspicion in her eyes. She knew Julian was cheating. She just didn't know the target was the wife of his biggest rival. "So, Ethan," Julian said, swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet, "I hear you've made some breakthroughs on the waterfront project. Cantilevered steel? Bold move in this climate." "It's all about the math, Julian," I replied, taking a slow bite of my steak. "If the math is right, the building stands. If the math is wrong, well, you know what happens to architects who get their math wrong." The next day, I went to a small private law office in the West Loop. I had invited Elena Vance to meet me there. She walked in, her heels clicking like gunfire on the hardwood. "What is this, Ethan? Julian doesn't know I'm here." "I know," I said, sliding a tablet across the desk. "And after you see what's on this screen, you're going to want to keep it that way." I showed her the logs. Not the architectural ones, the personal ones. The photos of Julian and Clara in Sedona. On the text where Julian called Elena, a dry, legalistic weight around his neck, and promised Clara they would be together once he liquidated their joint assets. Elena didn't cry. Her eyes just turned into chips of blue ice. "He's been funneling our personal savings into a shell company," she whispered. "He's not going to get a bonus," I said. "He's going to get a subpoena. But I need your help to make sure he doesn't see it coming." The following week was the City Future Gala. Every major firm in the Midwest was there. gathered under the soaring ceilings of the Union Station Great Hall. Clara was in a dress that cost more than my first car. Julian was nearby, surrounded by city officials, looking like the man of the hour. I stood by the bar, watching the countdown clock. The chairman of the planning commission took the stage. Before we announce the finalist for the Oasis Project, we have a special presentation regarding architectural integrity in our city. The lights dimmed, but instead of the promotional video everyone expected, the giant screens filled with a side-by-side comparison of my ghost blueprints and the bid Julian Vance had submitted that afternoon. A red box highlighted the Vance method cantilever specs. Then the screen showed a simulation. In the simulation, Julian's version began to twist. The digital skyscraper collapsed in a cloud of dust. A voice boomed over the speakers. It was a recording of Julian and Clara from my office hidden camera. Julian, this alloy spec is going to save us $40 million. Ethan's a genius, but he's too cautious. We will, Clara. He's so predictable, Julian. He thinks I'm meditating while I'm downloading his soul. The silence in the Great Hall was absolute. I turned to Clara. Her face wasn't just pale, it was gray. Like I said, Clara, I whispered in her ear, an open marriage wasn't necessary. You could have just asked for a divorce, but you wanted the building too. And now the whole thing is coming down on your head. The chairman didn't even use the microphone. He just pointed toward the exit. Mr. Vance, I believe your firm's presence is no longer required. Expect the state's attorney to be in contact by morning. Julian didn't fight. He turned and bolted for the heavy oak doors, leaving his wife, Elena, standing there with a smile that was sharper than a scalpel. Clara finally found her voice. Ethan, this isn't what it looks like. Industry standards don't involve a keystroke logger on my private server, Clara. They don't involve Sedona, and they certainly don't involve handing over my life's work to a man who couldn't design a birdhouse without a template. We drove home in a silence so thick it felt physical. When we pulled into the driveway, she tried to run inside. She stopped at the front door. Her key didn't turn. Ethan, the lock is stuck, she said. It's not stuck, Clara. It's been replaced. I walked to the side of the porch where 3 large suitcases were sitting. Everything that is legally yours is in those bags. I've already filed for an emergency restraining order. You aren't allowed on this property. This is my house, she screamed. Actually, you're on a deed for a house that has a massive lien on it now. Elena Vance and I spent the last 48 hours comparing notes. You don't own a brick here anymore. A black town car pulled up. Elena Vance stepped out. Hello, Clara, Elena said. I'm here to serve you the papers for the civil suit. I hope Sedona was worth it. The following weeks were a blur. Because Clara had accessed my firm's servers using my stolen credentials, the case was now a federal matter. I sat across from her in a sterile room in the Dirksen Federal Building. She looked different. The gallery curator polish had worn off. Her lawyer leaned forward. My client is willing to waive all claims to the marital assets in exchange for you dropping the criminal complaint regarding the data theft. I looked at Clara. She was staring at me, her eyes pleading. No, I said. Clara gasped. Ethan, please. I'll go away. You don't understand, Clara. This isn't about the money. This is about the integrity of the structure. You tried to weaken the foundations of my life to build a penthouse for Julian. In architecture, when someone intentionally compromises a structure, they lose their license. I pushed a folder toward her. Those are the transcripts of Julian's confession. He traded you in 3 hours after he was arrested. He called you the mastermind. Julian Vance's firm didn't just lose the project, they lost everything. Julian went from a titan of the skyline to a man living in a studio apartment in a part of the city he used to call the flyover zone. Clara fared even worse. The art world is small. She went from curated openings to working a desk job at a suburban strip mall insurance agency. To her name, a cautionary tale whispered over cocktails at the Gold Coast. I stayed in the house. I kept the furniture, but I painted every wall. I stripped the house down to its studs and rebuilt it. 6 months later, I was standing on the construction site of the Oasis Project, the real one. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan. My foreman, Sal, walked up. It's solid, Ethan. The math is perfect. This thing will be standing long after we're all gone. That's the goal, Sal, I said. Build things that last. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Clara's lawyer. She was begging for a character reference for a new job. She wanted me to say she was trustworthy. I didn't reply. I just deleted the email. I had learned that people are like buildings. Some are built for show, with beautiful facades and hollow interiors. And others are built with a core of reinforced concrete. I was the latter. The winter in Chicago doesn't just bite, it judges. It had been exactly 1 year since Clara had sat on that sofa and asked for an open marriage. The legal dust had settled. Clara had signed the final decree from a cramped apartment in Cicero, but the final blow was yet to come. The city had officially awarded my firm the contract. The groundbreaking ceremony was set for a Tuesday. The mayor was there. As I stood on the podium, I saw Julian Vance at the edge of the barricades. He looked older. He wasn't a VIP. He was a spectator. Architecture is the father of truth, I began into the microphone. If the foundation is built on deceit, the building will tell on you. It will crack, and eventually it will fall. After the ceremony, Julian was waiting for me near the parking garage. "Ethan, you won. I hope you're happy. You even took my license." "I didn't take anything, Julian. You threw those things away the second you decided that my wife was a tool you could use. You thought you were playing a game. I was just making sure the rules were followed." "She's a mess, you know," Julian spat. "She calls me sometimes, crying. She's working retail at a mall. Doesn't that make you feel anything?" "It makes me feel like the structural load has been correctly redistributed," I said. "She wanted an open life, Julian. Now she can see it all, from the ground up." I drove to the cemetery where my parents were buried. My father taught me that a house is only as good as the wood you use. I thought about Clara. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt, but the limb was gangrenous. If I hadn't cut it, it would have killed me. I had started seeing someone new. Her name was Maya. She didn't care about power couples. She cared about truth. One night she asked me, "Do you ever regret it? Letting her go the way you did?" I looked at the silhouette of the Sears Tower. "No, I don't regret the demolition. Some things have to be cleared away before you can see the view." Today, family secrets and revenge is more than just a story to me. It's a lifestyle. I realized that the family secrets weren't just the ones Clara kept. They were the ones I was keeping from myself. I deserved better. My life is no longer a performance. It's a solid, stable structure. I know every beam, and I know that if someone ever asked to open the door again, they'd better be prepared for the fact that I'm the one who holds the keys. The Oasis Project stands tall over the lake now. It's beautiful, it's functional, and it's safe. It was built the right way, and so was I. Thank you for staying with me through this journey of betrayal and rebuilding. This story is a reminder that the people we trust most can sometimes be the ones holding the wrecking ball. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up, please hit the like button and subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge. It helps us keep sharing these powerful stories. What would you have done in my position? Would you have been as patient, or would you have ended it the moment she asked for that open marriage? Share your overall thoughts in the comments below. I can't wait to hear your perspective.